Good evening. Oh, well done. Very well done. I'm David Nixon, for those of you who do not know me. I'm the Artistic Director of Northern Ballet, and I'd like to welcome all of you here this evening. Anyone who is a first-timer for one of these events, and especially our patrons and our very dear friends of Northern Ballet, without whom, actually, we could never arrive at this point to do what we're going to show you here this evening. I'd also like to, before I dive into anything about my dear Kenny, is take a moment just to introduce our fantastic stage manager, who's an unsung hero in many respects. He was a great dancer with English National Ballet. He's been with us a long time now, Chun Yen Chia. So. This production of Casanova, I think, marks an extraordinary moment in the history of Northern Ballet, because it is that moment when one of our very own takes the reins and starts to speak with their own voice. And years ago, when Kenny was a dancer with the company, we always got along really well, except those times when he was a little bit naughty. But other than that, he was just wonderful to work with in the studio, and especially as he grew up and developed, he became such a great performer and interpreter and a fantastic partner. But he'll probably tell you to do most of my pas de deux, you either become a good partner or you die. So, and the thing about the process was I didn't understand at first just how gifted his imagination was. And the first time I saw it was when we created a Sleeping Beauty tale. And he was going to be the Red Wizard. And he created something so fantastic that I felt obligated to include him in the third act. Now, that sounds good until the fact is he was never meant to be in the third act. So most of the time I kept looking at him thinking, what are you doing here in the room? And I had to kind of figure out how to make the wizard be part of it. But it was because he was just so inventive. And that went on in the work we did, and especially I always look at Cleopatra, where he was able to create Wajette, the snake god, because it was like two fantastic prodigies at the beginning and the end of the evening, and yet he had to sustain the performance through the whole night just by his presence on stage, which is probably one of the most demanding things for an artist. So when the first workshop came here in our new wonderful facility, Kenny did not sign up on the list to do a choreography. And most of you have probably heard the story, our friends have at least, so bear with me. So I kind of pushed him into it, and then finally he did his first piece, which was a finished work on a very first go. And I think I knew then and there that it was a special talent. So over the next couple of years, we were able to give him further commissions in our mixed rep program. And then finally, Kenny made that big decision, which is hard for any of us as dancers, to stop dancing and face the world with a new face, essentially, which in his case was to go out there as a choreographer. Now, I always wanted Kenny to do his first big full length with us. I felt it was right. He's our kid, and he knows the company inside and out. He knows the dancers. And I just felt that this is what has to happen, but he has to come with his idea, because the last thing that a young choreographer needs is you to tell them what ballet they're going to do. They need to feel it from inside. So fortunately for myself and Mark, Kenny came to us just over a year ago actually, and said he had two ideas, and the first idea was Casanova. And actually I kind of sighed relief inside, and that's where we started it. And it's been so far a wonderful journey. He assembled a fantastic creative team, which he'll probably tell you about. And the work the company's doing is just exceptional. I mean, I'm just amazed, and I'm thrilled that I get to actually be a ballet master on it. Kenny actually lets me play with his toys, and I haven't had so much fun, I don't even remember the last time. So before I turn this over to Kenny and our wonderful dancers, you're going to have another special treat this evening, and that is you're going to hear from Ian Kelly, who is an actor, a biographer, and also a screenplay writer. And Kenny met up with Ian, and Ian was doing I think you were performing in your own work, were you not? He was performing his own work in London. And Kenny's kind of up front. He just kind of goes through the door, and he got together with Ian, and who had written actually Casanova's biography, and they just, I think, got along from the beginning. And this has been a wonderful thing for Kenny, I think, because it took him into the world of Casanova from somebody who actually really knows Casanova. Therefore, the story is so strongly rooted, which has always been important to Northern Ballet, that it's rooted in truth. And from that, they were also, because they're both men of the theater, to create the theatrics of it. So I'm turning this over to you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, David. Thank you for all being here this evening in this ever so slightly warm studio. Things heat up, I find out, in a ballet studio in the ways they don't always at the National Theatre. My name's Ian Kelly. I'm an actor and playwright and historian. And the reason I stand here in front of you as possibly the happiest biographer there has ever been is that I wrote a biography some years ago of Giacomo Casanova. And although this story begins properly in 1725 in Venice, our bit of the story begins about a year ago when I had a play on in London, Mr. Foot's Other Leg, another sort of Georgian piece. You're looking at an image of Giacomo Casanova next to an image, it should be said, of our own Giuliano Contadini, half above my book, as it were. It is the very image of book becomes man, becomes ballet, as it were. But my world is 18th century biography in part. A joy with the world of 18th century art, which includes necessarily the birth of ballet, but obviously a world that has given us so much that we take for granted in the modern world. And I've only been given 15 minutes to talk to you this evening, although there's an awful lot a man can do in 15 minutes, as indeed Giacomo Casanova once said. So I will skip over some of the thesis of this, but it is, in brief, a brave new world in 18th century study, that just maybe there are aspects of modern culture and the modern liberties we have taken for granted that are born of this period and are born in particular of the 18th century city and are born of fascinating individuals. And I had a play on about a one-legged transvestite Georgian comedian, ridiculously, called Mr. Foot's Other Leg at the Theatre Royal Haymarket in the West End last year, starring Simon Russell Beale. It was directly outside that same theatre that Samuel Foote and Giacomo Casanova bumped into each other, quite literally, in November of 1763, and it is precisely where I had the huge joy and honor of meeting the marvelously talented Kenny Tindall. He'd already asked about the dramatic rights of my book, but of that moment and that agenda was born the idea that also I would come on board as sort of co-scenario writer. So this is a story, very unusually, of course, for dance and for classical ballet in particular, rooted in reality, rooted in, indeed, non-fiction, rooted in a real biography, and everybody you see on stage has their original counterpart in history, in 18th century Venice and Paris, where we mainly obsess. But, well, there are a couple of questions pending, I suppose, always in a situation like this. One of them I've tried to answer, the first question being, why is a writer talking about the ballet? But the second, and something I should address straight away, is what hovers over any occasion about Casanova. A question which more or less goes, why it is that this extraordinary man, who was fluent in 8 languages and wrote in 6 of them, who was conversant with or in correspondence with Rousseau and Voltaire and Catherine the Great and Frederick the Great and Samuel Johnson and Benjamin Franklin, a man who traveled 78,000 kilometers all over Europe in an era when it's widely accounted it takes as long to travel in a day, a distance we would now expect to travel in an hour. Why a man who was the first person ever to translate the Iliad into modern Italian, who was an expert on cubic geometry, who collaborated with Lorenzo da Ponte on the I've gone ahead too fast when I'm looking for that, on the libretto for Mozart's Don Giovanni. Why a man who did all of this is largely only remembered for his sex life and for perhaps ill-advisedly writing about it, something we should maybe never do. Well, in brief, I should say, it's a complete accident that he has this sort of posthumous infamy. In the Anglophone world, rather more than many other languages, it should be said, because he wrote a memoir late in his life, a depressive, a poor, depressed and ill librarian in rural Bohemia, advised by his doctor that the best cure for his melancholia was to write everything he could remember of everything he had lived and experienced. And that gave us, ultimately, what became known as the Histoire de ma vie, the history of my life. He never meant it to be published. What was first published were some excerpts that were taken from it. It was willed to his niece, and she'd taken it to a publisher. And mistranslated excerpts of his memoir, mistranslated from the original French into German, mistranslated further into English. And what was first known of Giacomo Casanova was that which was published, in effect, as erotica. There is so much more to this man and to this story. A man who tells us more about the 18th century than any writer of that period, for which reason it should be said when his memoirs recently came upon the open market only a few years ago, they were bought by the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris for more money than has ever been paid for an 18th century document ever. This is now considered one of the key documents to understand this particular period. But that, in and of itself, of course, perhaps wouldn't answer exactly why we sit or stand here this evening. I am passionate about this period. I am passionate, however, about this man, because he is such a perfect, person-shaped keyhole on this fascinating era for everything he tells us of what it was to be alive then and his brave new way of looking at the world. A way and a manner, it should be said, that was absolutely steeped in the theatre and in his background, indeed, in dance. One of the joys of this particular project, because a number of my books have been adapted one way or another as films or as plays, is that I am also utterly convinced that this is the perfect medium for this particular story. Giacomo Casanova, son of two dancers who spent his life always surrounded by performers, whose relationship with the world was as a performer, and that perhaps also is some of his particular gift as a writer, which we also try to address in the ballet. He was born in the wings of the San Samuele Theatre, as legend has it. So busy an actress and dancer was his mother. She went straight back on stage again afterwards. But that is the beginning of his life, and this indeed is one of the end points of it. This is a ball held in the Estates Theatre in Prague, which many of you would know if you've been there. It exists to this day. It was where the Venetian Opera Company performed, where Don Giovanni was premiered with Giacomo Casanova, indeed, in the audience. But this is the last dance, as it were, of Giacomo Casanova. He's somewhere in the crowd there. The very last dance, as it's often described, of the Ancien Régime. It was in honor of Leopold II, whose sister Marie-Antoinette was already awaiting execution. One of the fascinating issues of Casanova, and some of the power of its writing, and some of the importance of what we're trying to get across on stage as well, is this. Casanova is an old man trying to capture the beauty of life as he sees it. He's also a man who is convinced that the world is going to hell in a handcart, a rather familiar idea at the moment, and that for that reason we might also attend to beauty and to the sensual with greater accord than we might otherwise do, perhaps. Some of the power of his writing is seeded around that idea, but it is also, of course, an idea of what it is to live a beautiful life in the most beautiful city in the world, then as now, which is why we start off in Venice, and indeed in the Venetian church. Casanova was a little bit well known in his own lifetime, but not as a lover at all. He was known for everything else that he did. He had a series of careers as a musician and librettist, as a mathematician. He's the first person to run a lottery, would you believe, in France. He travels all over the world, but he starts off his life as a priest. Somewhat risibly, one might say, given his current fame. But we start off in that world, and that's a little bit of what I believe you are going to be seeing later, his world as seminarian, before it all goes wrong or right, depending on which way you look at it. But this issue of Venice is key to an understanding of the man, and also some of what we're trying to get across in this ballet. Casanova's insights on life are fascinating. But he has, as I say, a performer's take and also a Venetian's take, that maybe actually life is a performance in many ways. It's often said that one of the gifts of the Enlightenment is a fascination all over again with the sensual. Casanova is a great food writer, it should be said, but also an awareness with wanting to deal with the sensual because of a new idea born of this period that just maybe we keep something hidden a lot of the time. It's often said that the Enlightenment's greatest gift to Western culture is an idea that there is an interior life, an id, if you like, a boutique arrière, as Montesquieu had it. Well, certainly this is Casanova's take on the world as a Venetian, that we hide and we show, we play with masks all the time. It was instinctive for him as a Venetian. It was perhaps why he had such success as a lover and a traveler of his era. It's also why he is such a fascinating writer, because he's right at the center of this new way of thinking, and why, but of course, we deal with mask and masquerade in the performance of the dance of Casanova, because it is right at the core of an understanding of him and of this period. However, it's a dark tale in part as well. Casanova, son of the Enlightenment, fascinated by the new sciences, the new revolutions in philosophy and science and indeed in mathematics. And he had a singular skill, bizarrely, in numbers, for which reason he became fascinated in the Kabbalah, that esoteric area of Judaic mysticism which tumbled out of the Venetian ghetto at exactly this period. And as a result of this, he was declared a heretic, and as a result of that, he was imprisoned. This is some of the drama that we address in the story, in particular in the ballet, because it is, as it were, a rise and a fall and a rise again. He's an incredibly impressive, energetic, febrile character who's able to constantly reinvent himself, never more clearly than in his ability to have half his life on the road as an exile, as a jailbird. He's the only person known to have escaped from the prison of the Venetian Inquisition. You can visit it to this day. It's in the roof of the Doge's palace, Il Piombi, the leads, just under the lead roof. Giacomo Casanova escaped and spent his life thereafter pretty much on the road and on the run. However, and here's another character we meet in this ballet, he fell rather fast, it should be said, in Paris into the beautifully upholstered bosom of Madame de Pompadour. Here she is, maître sans titre, official court mistress to Louis XV of France. It was a very fortuitous meeting at the theater, at the ballet. There's a wonderful little story that actually what won him Pompadour's favor was his wit, it should be said. A man who said he was never considered handsome. He said, I simply had an unbridled belief that anything was possible, something which comes over well, I dare say, at court sometimes. They're watching the ballet, and Madame de Pompadour asked for him to come over to be introduced, this very tall Venetian, and says, is it really true that you're from down there in Venice? And Giacomo Casanova said to the most powerful woman in France, he said, Madame de Pompadour, Venice is not down, it is up. And she asked which of the ballet dancers he preferred. They were dancing in shorter skirts. The ballet is one of the few places where you could legitimately see a woman's legs in the 18th century. And he expressed his preference, and Madame de Pompadour said she thought this ballet dancer had rather ugly legs. And Casanova said in reply, the very first thing, Madame de Pompadour, that one should put to one side when addressing the business of a woman's beauty is her legs. He used, it should be said, the French verb écarter, which does mean to put aside. It also means to spread asunder. It is typical of kind of Casanova's wit and the kind of double entendre much admired by Madame de Pompadour, as a result of which he became a great court favorite. And this is the foundations of his legend, really, his wealth, it should be said, his ability to travel all over Europe, visiting Catherine the Great, visiting Voltaire and Rousseau, whom you encounter in the ballet, though running out of steam and out of luck in our very own London. He went to commit suicide off Westminster Bridge. This is Canaletto's view of it as Casanova would have known it. And I should say also that this story takes us to some of the darker moments of the memoirs and of the man. He was probably a manic depressive of some sort, but certainly the writings are born out of a dark passage in his life and a desperation on his part to make sense of his world and rediscover the joys as he had seen them, which are partly travel, which are partly people. He says that what fascinated him was never geography, but the geography of the human heart. He once said that when he met somebody, and in particular a woman, what fascinated him was to work out what made her unhappy and then see if he could solve it. He was, as it were, the great people person. He also, though, had a fascination with recreating a central universe, which is what makes him such a powerful and such a revolutionary, such an unusual writer, but also takes us, because of his sad decline here at Duchkov, the castle as it now looks, to his wonderful musings on love and indeed on sex. So although I spend a lot of my time as a biographer of Casanova, as it were, trying to say, you've got to understand there's so much more than just the Lothario. There's so much more than you think there might be. He is also absolutely fascinating and very important on love and on sex. One of the great gifts also of the Enlightenment, as it's often now discussed, is the 18th century as the first sexual revolution. And let us be clear about the fact that an element of Western culture, a seam that runs through, that is most clear and most vibrant, most colorful, perhaps has been the sexual liberations born of the 18th century. He is fascinating and incredibly brave in trying to address some of that for, it should be said, restricted world, I suppose, of 18th century libertines and 18th century city folk. Nevertheless, that issue of Cupid, of Eros, of amour, as it was known in the 18th century, this idea of an element of chaos that is sometimes the turning point in our lives, is what Casanova tries to address in his writings, and also is that which we try to address in the ballet. Because rather wonderfully, but of course, a man who dedicates himself as a writer to trying to stop the clock, attend to the moment, mindfully to the beauty of our lives and to the sensual, is a man who absolutely understands what it is one essays in dance. To be alive in a space to beauty and to sensuality, to actually express embodies the closeness we can have in life and the distance between ourselves. Mae West once opined that sex is emotion in motion, which is some sort of definition of ballet, of course, as well, and what he is trying to explore as a sensualist and as a lover, as a connector with other people, is that which he shares with the world of dance and of ballet, which is why also I should say, of course, this epic, picaresque life has been distilled into the essence of the man and indeed of his love affairs. And the women are astonishing. He over and over again went out of his way to chase, to woo, and usually to be left by, it should be said, if not seduced by in the first place. Powerful and important women, very often professional women, and very often professional performers. Singers, in one case, a woman soprano, there she is on the left-hand side as you look at her, Teresa Lanti, who was known as Bellino, a soprano obliged to masquerade as a man in order to perform as a castrato in masquerade, pretending to be a woman, if you see what I mean. It all gets a bit as you like it, but this is some of the kink that Casanova enjoyed, and of course, some of what we're trying to explore in terms of masks and performance. Manon Balletti, nearest me here, you'll recognize this perhaps, the Nattier portrait from the National Portrait Gallery in London. One of the most famous images of 18th century beauty was the woman Casanova was engaged to briefly, a professional cellist. Henriette, the greatest love of his life, it's often argued, we have no image of, because he went to great lengths in his memoirs to keep her identity secret. So there is, in closing, therefore, I hope in all of this, a whole brave new world of so much more than you think you might know already about Casanova, but also, I would strongly argue, an importance in addressing love, sensuality, as it was understood in the 18th century, for a reevaluation now. The writings of this man, the life as it was lived and recorded, to address that now in dance has been by far and away the most exciting creative journey of my life thus far. And I would say to all of you, so much more than you think you might know already. I'll leave you with just one thought, perhaps. When I first talked about this, was up in Scotland, just after the book came out, and I was a bit nervous about it all, because it was a book event, and there was a great sea of blue rinse and spectacles in front of me. And I was a bit alarmed about where it all might go, being a man talking about sex and sensuality from perhaps a man's perspective in the 18th century. Anyway, we kept waiting a little while, and two elderly ladies came up to me, one of them from London. She was visiting her cousin in Scotland. And the first lady, she said, Mr. Kelly, she said, I do hope you're not going to titivate us, which is a very difficult question to answer. But before I had a chance to worry about it, her much older cousin, who was in her mid-90s, she said to me, she said, Mr. Kelly, you must not hold back on any details, she said. She said, I lived through the Blitz, which has put Anderson shelters and all of that in a whole other perspective ever since. But I leave that, I suppose, as a floating thought. I am inviting my 10-year-old daughter to this event and this ballet, and indeed my mother or my grandmother, if she was still with us. That thing that is shared across the ages, that actually there is joy in our lives as we live them, and there is also that issue sometimes that you can look at history and you can connect with the people and the ideas of the past through the lived moment and the sensual, is precisely what Casanova is trying to write about, and an awful lot of what we're trying to say in the extraordinary beauty of dance, which is perhaps the moment to say that in the course of all of this, I could think of no finer creative genius, I'll say it, to deal with the genius and febrile, curious world traveler that is Giacomo Casanova than the extraordinary tyro of energy and enthusiasm and passion and talent that is the man I have the honor to call my friend and co-scenario writer, Kenny Tindall. Type of thing.
First of all, Mr. Ian Kelly, thank you. What a pleasure. And also to David Nixon. So many thanks. I'm so excited to be here and to start this journey and to show you some of it. I think you've heard enough, and I'd like to show you some of that beautiful articulation in a physical way. So I'm going to bring on two of our dancers, Giuliano Contadini, who is Casanova, and Dreda Blow, who is Bellino. So Ian explained briefly about the man masquerading as a woman, woman masquerading as a man to sing. So that's the relationship we're going to look at the moment, is a castrati, a woman that was forced to masquerade as a man so that she could sing because it was banned in the Papal States. Obviously, to a young Giacomo Casanova, this is hugely exciting because he cannot work out whether it's a man or a woman, and it's driving him crazy. This is early on in this relationship, and it's the second time that we're seeing them together. So we're just going to work through. It's been a couple of days, and I haven't seen it for a while, so we're just going to see how it goes. Is that all right with you guys? Fab. Churn. Good. Actually, that was far too good. I don't have much to work on. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of the conversation here and a lot of the vocabulary is trust and unmasking, and what that would take in the position she's in to do that with him, and him trying to earn it. So a big portion of the vocabulary is unmasking yourself. So just take your mask for a second. It's nice when you're facing him and you pull away from it. So when you take his. So for me, it had to be really clear that it's actually Giacomo Casanova wears many masks in his time throughout life. In his ballet, he plays many roles, and it's a really important part that he's able to adapt like that, to survive, to grow, to do the things he did. And so this is what that looks like in a physical vocabulary for us. This is what we're trying to explain with it here. So come off it really clean, yes, and replace, good. Does that read to you clearly? Yeah? Fabulous. Okay. So then it became, how do we build a material from trust? What does that look like? And I'll show you what it looks like. Giuliano, go back into it. Mm-hmm. Jules, as late as possible. As late as possible. Yes! The heart drops out. You can see it in her face. White out. He's never going to be there. But that's what we need narratively to tell that story with that step, and that's it right there. So carry on and move out for the next move, which requires even more trust. Fabulous. And shoot out. Shoot, shoot, shoot. Yes. Can only work with absolute precision and timing. Otherwise, it's going to hit the floor. So it can only be achieved with trust. So it works really clearly for us. Just show me this lift again. It's just the transition into the next bit. It can be smoother. So here, good. It needs to be bigger, freer. Right. Yeah, in the arms before. And good. And okay. Yeah, that's okay. Great. So he just needs a tiny bit longer. Fab. Yeah. Be careful not to undress her yet. And good. Keep it moving, keep it moving, keep it moving, keep it moving. Yes. Fantastic. Nice. It was so very good already. Okay. So then we try to extend that, because eventually what happens in this relationship is he sets her free to be a woman, to be a soprano singer, which is a beautiful side of Giacomo that you might know. It's not just the bed-notch libertine. It's someone that actually elevates and helps women move on to the next station. And that was a really beautiful thing for me and Ian, and a really important part of our story to tell. So we're just playing with some of the vocabulary right now in the third part of where that's going to happen. So what I'd really like you to do is go from this section into the forward, into your big lift. Yeah. If you can. Yeah, when you're ready. No, just go. Yeah, go for it. It's fine. And stay connected. Lovely. Fabulous. No, very smooth. Good, 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 good. Very nice, very nice. This great articulation of the flex point is moving between man and woman. The not wanting to let go, the not wanting to say, but it's there all in that as he elevates her right up into his trust, into that he'll support that fact. Can we go back to the beginning? I think we can be a little bit more playful. Now we know what this scene is coming out from before of the second part of there.
When I first come in.
Where you'll find when you first come in, it's when, Jules, it's when you're stalking her a little bit. So you've met the bump, boom, stop. We need to see that connection, like really break before anything happens, right? Good. Mm-hmm. Then you make the conscious decision, back, face on, mask, good. Second, let her play a game, full move, and then a little bit change in your dynamic. And this a little bit more playful, not so serious, yeah. Right. This is the second time at this, so you've got to change your game up a little bit. Okay, good. One more time, and boom. Good. She moves away from you, exactly. And carry on. Yes. She won't be found out and she's not panicking. Good. Now this here in this pacing. Pa, and, pa, pa, pa. Yes, good. Fab. Here. Now, this was much better today because you didn't have to shuffle to get your feet. Yeah. So this takes a really good coordination, but it can come off further for me. Like the trust thing, it has to come off further. So more. More, more, more. Yes. This is a good sign. So I think it can go even further, no? It's just the coordination when you pull. This should come down, come down. Keep coming, keep coming. Don't release your foot. There. Now release your foot. Yes, yes, good, good, good.
Oh, maybe I could, yeah. So then I start to slide.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Now reach round, reach round, reach round, reach round. Yes, yes, and yes. Only the tension is going to solve that problem, and it has to be just right between the two of them. If it's not an equal partnership, it's just going to fall and collapse. And that, again, helps our narrative, right? So, fabulous. This was nice, this moving on. Just one more time. Into the chest. Excellent. Touch and go. Yes, 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 yes. And then your songbird. Good, good. Keep moving, keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. And there's something I love about this moment because you don't let him in, but it's really subtle. He goes to make his move on you, and you just put your guard up, and that's it, and you react to it, which you kind of like that she's playing that game. Again, it's a game.
I'm going to win.
Yeah. This was fab, and I think there's a little cheekiness into the fact of she has a very elaborate costume on, which is wonderful, and I don't want to give it away, but there's something very clearly here. So, yeah. But she's still not going to be flustered. Now, this is great. Good. Down. Are you a woman? And again, Dreda, not too angry, just evading the question rather than reacting to it. And, good. And now this is really important for me because even though he's pushing into it, part of you is like, I don't want to give it away, but that actually feels good. Like, I want to give into that. Like, I'm tired of being a man. Yeah? Yes, and now mask on, mask on. Good. Jules, let me see what's behind that mask. It was good the way you did it, just in your conversation. And here, for us, it's really nice if the audience, if you really pass the two heads, so you see them really swapping places. Yeah, but... Uh-huh. Yes, excellent. Boom. Good. Uh-huh, sneak peek. Back. This, you do this so well when you're face to face, and it has to have the same feeling when you pull it up, ceiling, and down to the, and down, turn. Good. Now this I love. This is, it says everything. Can I trust this? So she comes in. This reaction's great. You don't expect that to happen. Like, it's not. We've seen what's just come before that. Why is it going to have any reaction? But it goes straight through you because the connection is deeper than the rest, yeah? And, yes. Now the third one catches you right off guard. And up. Yes. And this is perfect, perfect. So one mask, and you're not so sure you want to put your mask up. You're ready already. There's something about this woman that's fascinating you. So your mask goes up slower. It doesn't need to get there so fast. Maybe you're already thinking of taking it off, and then this is great the way you take that small detail into the way you take his hand. Peel it off. Yes. Excellent. Yes. Great, guys. Good. Unlock it, and keep your mask in his. Fabulous. Down. This is good, we saw that. Okay, I just want to look at a bit of material from the other one. So can we start the third, the things that we're starting to work on from, and we will stop it at pulling up from Mermaid.
Okay.
Yeah?
Start with the dance.
No, start with the, yeah? Chun, the third part of there, but just the, from the leg. Okay. Chun, the resident superstar. Good, guys. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Bit strange, right? Hello. I'm really tempted to do the Darth Vader thing. Luke, I am. Yeah? Fabulous. Okay, let's just do the first bit. As connected and as smooth as possible. When you're ready. And go. Excellent. Keep moving. Stop. Swing. Yes. Drop. And melt. Slowly, coordinated. Okay, good. So you come back for more, right? Good. Fabulous. Okay, really good. Yeah, rest. Fabulous. So we need to do the last of our trust vocabulary. Yeah? As one. Off. Yes. And down and free. Go. Lovely. That's enough. Super. Really good. That was nice, huh? Really free. You want to try anything else on that part of there? We're good now, right?
Sometimes this is a bit clunky.
Okay, let's look. It's also when you hit the knee and you carry on from it as well. Yeah. Smooth, down, smooth. And yes, and fall. Backwards. Okay, good. Very smooth, very nice, very connected, yeah. Okay, fabulous. I think we have worn you two enough for this evening. They've been dancing all day, so thank you very much. Yeah. So like David said before, we have a fabulous relationship as dancer and director, as choreographer, all the works we've done together. And it's just moved even further and onto a really great level. And it's amazing to have that level of experience behind you as you take on one of the biggest challenges in your choreographic career already. In fact, I feel hugely privileged in it all so far. You can pretty much see why I had to have Ian Kelly on board with this project. He is Mr. Casanova. He absolutely knows everything. I mean, you can't catch him out. I tried. I read your book a couple of times, and then I went through as much of the memoirs as I could. There's 12 volumes. I didn't get all the way, I'm not going to lie. It was like, I can't remember how many words there is. And I tried to catch him out. I was like, well, you know, about so-and-so, the Yorkshire pudding in London, Ian. And you were like, yeah, absolutely, on 18, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, come on, you must be joking me. But actually, it's really important for me to also evoke the worlds of the 18th century, to evoke the masquerade, the musicians, the church, the gambling halls, the ridottos. Those are something you can really viscerally enjoy and be part of. And I think we are doing a really good job at bringing you into that at the moment. But that requires a really experienced and excellent team that are all on the same page. So the music is wonderful, emotive, and for the last 10 months via Skype to LA, I've worked with the film composer Kerry Muzzy to make this score come to life, and it is tailor-made for every section, every minute of the dance, which is incredible. So we know the story inside out. But before all of that, Ian and myself spent weeks first in his 18th century vicarage, of course, with the Shakespearean love bed in his house, which I slept in, which was phenomenal, writing this and deciding, you know, it's too vast to tell the whole story. 12 volumes is too much. He just did too much. So we didn't want to go from A to Z. So how do we distill this, man? How do we capture the essence against the backdrop of this incredible period? And so we cherry-picked the parts of Ian's book and the relationships we thought would work best for theatre and for our narrative, and really to capture Giacomo as best as possible in 100 minutes. The sets and costumes, I really didn't want the show to go up and an old man be sitting at his desk and Vivaldi to be playing. I didn't want all the pointers in the right 18th century direction and to be correct. Hence why I brought an 18th century specialist to see how we could take a fresh perspective on that and how we could deconstruct the period and the look of the costumes and try to inject it with a modern edge so that it could appeal to a mass audience and bring this man to as many people as possible. And tasked with that responsibility was Christopher Oram. The other thing I should say is that it's Ian and Chris's first ballet, which I love. My first full length, their first ballets. And I think that it was invaluable to have somebody coming from different perspectives. So the project is immediately different because our worlds, yes, they're the same and they're compatible, but they're also completely different in some respects. And it was to gather as many minds from a theatrical background and from theatrical nature to make this as rich as it possibly could be. So I'm absolutely thrilled with what that team has delivered. And even better than that, they've become really good friends. And I think that's the most you can hope for. It's been a really honest and true collaboration. And if nothing else, I will definitely take that away from me. It's been mega support from Mark, especially David here at Northern Ballet. What a lovely place to come back to and a story to start it all. So thank you very much for that. We're going to show you two brief excerpts from the ballet. And much like Ian said, we're going to show you something hopefully you didn't know about him. From his time as a priest, no, we're not. Oh, we're not. You don't get to see it. It's cut. It's been gone.
We have something before that.
Sorry. Apologies.
You get to take a load off.
Oh, I do.
For a minute.
Yes.
So, before we see the excerpts that Kenny was very excited for you to see, so he jumped the gun a little bit, we're going to have a question and answer. So I hope some of you are going to ask some questions from four of our wonderful dancers. Joining us will be Giuliano and Dreda, who you just saw dance, and also will be Hannah Bateman, who is the wife of Kenneth Tindall and longtime leading dancer at Northern Ballet now, and she's actually the Henriette in the first cast, which I kind of find quite interesting, that Casanova's greatest love is probably being danced by Kenny's greatest love. And also joining us is the much-loved, young, wonderful spirited dancer who I tend to refer as the host with the mostest, but Gavin McCaig. So I'm going to be the kind of hand the mic around. And there are mics on the side. So please, somebody must have a question. Come on. Thank you.
Kenny was incredibly nice to you, very sweet, and he was giving you lots of positive feedback, and then threw in, you could do this better. Is he always like that? Is he such a nice person?
Do we ask the wife or do we ask the dancers?
Kenny's wonderful. Like, we spend 6 hours a day together creating, and we put our best efforts and ideas together. So sometimes we have to try and see if it works out to actually make a decision for the benefit of the ballet to see if the best comes out of it. So sometimes it's just butting heads, but it's not in a bad way. There's no hard feelings, and I trust Kenny completely. So whenever he tells me, that was big crap, you don't take it personally. It's just the work that we're doing, because I want to look good on stage, and he's the eyes that will allow me to look that good. So I have no hard feelings, and I love everything that he has to say.
Another question? Here.
You mentioned that he had 2 ideas. What was the other one? What can you not
Oh,
say?
this is Casanova Unmasked. This is not the future.
Okay. We'll wait and see.
Yes. As Kenny keeps telling me every time he gets stuck, he says, just one step forward at a time. Yes?
Thank you for everything so far. What have you, as dancers, learned about that period? And does that teach you anything about today?
Ooh, you're tricky. I'm going to ask the wife.
I think what's interesting about it is that a lot of society then was about masking themselves and sort of going out in public as your, Beyonce, not being Beyonce, being Sasha Fierce. It's kind of that alter ego. And what's interesting for us in modern day is that we do that still, but we do it behind the mask of social media. So whereas you may create a different personality on Instagram to who you are every day in the office. So in those respects, there's been lots of similarities. They seem to be a lot freer in a way, and they seem to live much more in the moment, which is something I think we could all learn from. So perhaps be a bit safer in the way that we do it. But it's opened our eyes to a lot of things, and the way they lived life, it was so lavish. I mean, it just looks like so much fun. So yeah, we've learned a lot in a good way.
Next. I have one that I want to ask Dreda, because you see, as a man, you're partnering the woman and you think everything's just fine, but you're actually not the one above their heads, or in this case, diving backwards with nothing there. It's kind of like jumping out of an airplane, and I guess in hope it must be a similar feeling the first time as a parachute. But I would really like to know what that feels like to you and what crosses your mind when Kenny says to do that.
Juliana, are you there? Are you there? Juliana, are you there? It took a little bit of practice to get it quite as brave as it might have looked today. I think the first couple times I definitely chickened out by screaming and pulling my foot underneath me or putting my hands on the floor. But you just have to be so trusting in your partner. You just have to know that they're there. And I've danced with Giuliano in quite a few ballets now, which really helps. So I know he would never never let me fall, never let me hurt myself. And you just kind of have to bite the bullet. And it helps when Kenny's there, like, just do it, just be brave, just do it, just do it. He's even actually gone, just do it, and shoved me over a little bit, like in the trailer on the table, with a mask on in the dark. But it's okay. But then you can do it. You can do it. And so yeah, there's a moment though where you're biting your lip, or like, okay.
How many casts are you rehearsing?
We are rehearsing 3 soloist casts and then 2, 3-ish in the core. But Kenny's been really good. We've had, and I'm going to say I've been really good because I've given a lot of time to this ballet. As 9 weeks it'll be in the end, pretty much total. And it is right, because what we're doing simultaneously is we're able to rehearse things already. And for instance, I mean, I had an eagle eye tonight on this pas de deux because I've been rehearsing Joseph and Lucia, and I've been saying my little fantasy with it. And so tonight I was like, what's Kenny saying? Uh-oh. And I've got my notes I wrote down for tomorrow's rehearsal, what we're going to have to do and what we're going to check on. So we're really doing it in a really good way in terms of Kenny progresses sometimes with just the first cast while the others are rehearsing, then he brings them in, and I think it's been a good process. But I'll ask Gavin, who'll have something to say about it, because he's probably second and third sometimes, so let's see how he feels.
I would say in general, even if one cast is just being rehearsed at the front of the room, usually the first cast, we're all there. So you're involved, and even if you're not directly in front of Kenny, you're at the back trying the material and working with your partner that would be in your cast, because every cast should be just as good as the next. So yeah.
Love the accent. So we get one, I think one more question do we have time for? And I think Janet had one. I'm going to come forward. Yeah, but I'm coming to you, darling.
Thank you. Looking at the trailer, the wigs for the ladies look quite elaborate. Do you get a chance to rehearse in those?
This is going to be the most elaborate wig ballet in the history of ballet since Louis, I think. Yes, and every single dancer except, I believe, this one, who's got his own look now, is going to have a wig. And Kenny's plan is, I'll just speak because I know what the plan is. Kenny insisted from the beginning that we already will be putting wigs on the week before we go into the theater in the studio with the costumes. And if you could go up and see Harriet, head of wigs, little office right now, it is like some sort of Da Vinci decoding office with, I mean, just how this has got to happen. I think we should be filming what's going on off stage as much as what's going on stage, because it's its own ballet in this production. So I think we need to now move on to something really exciting. And I think I'd like to thank you guys, first of all. And Kenny, would you like to introduce your work? I mean, I'm happy to introduce your work. But
I have my mic, it's fine. Left off a second ago. Thanks, guys, very much. We're going to look at the seminarians, which is part of the church world where Casanova was a priest. And then after that, we're going to look at the musicians, where he was a violinist who picked up a touring band, joined a touring band, and he auditioned and played for a masquerade. So we're going to have a brief look at two of those excerpts. Guys, you ready? Is anybody ready? There's somewhere. Here we go. Fabulous. Okay. Guys, go get changed. Fabulous. Thank you so much. I mean, they've been dancing since 10 o'clock this morning, and they're still here and still going now. Uber professional, an absolute joy to work with. I'm just going to fill in a few minutes here while 3 of these guys have to quickly get changed. They'd obviously also be changing their wigs in the show at this point and their entire costumes. And like David said, it's going to be a well-drilled machine behind. I think we have 40 wigs per show. And 60 all in all. They are quite fabulous, and they're being made by Richard Morby, who is known as the wig whisperer. He can, yeah, seriously true. He came in, he literally brought in a suitcase, put his hand on the guys' heads, and just be like, yes, this one will fit perfectly. And it did. It was a really incredible thing. And it's a good question about whether or not we get to rehearsing them. For all the rehearsal costumes, some of the costumes, as you can see in the back, they are an unusual shape. And actually, we've been really well organized to have at least mock-ups of those shapes in the rehearsal room. So all the material we create, like immediately we created this material in the cassocks so that we can know the way it's going to move, know the way it's going to feel, so the fabric isn't going to surprise us by the time we get to the stage. It's the same with the panniers, it's the same with the hoop skirts. We have them, we have a practice of it, so that we don't get too involved and too far down the line and realize it's not going to work. So yes, fingers crossed it will be smooth, Janet. Guys, how are you getting on? I love that. Yeah, well, fill it in for a sec. Good. On your feet. I'm trying to think. Masks. So Hannah mentioned briefly on the anonymity of that, and there was a long conversation between Ian and myself about that, what that does psychologically to someone that is masked for 3/4 of the year through Venice and its Carnivale and all of those things. And the mischief or the thoughts or being able to be hidden somewhere and then showing yourself or hiding it. It's a really big part of the ballet. It's really interesting what happened with the dance material when we went into the studio and we put the dancers behind the masks. It became immediately much more sensual. I think they'll tell you they felt much safer. It's like the blinkers go on and suddenly they're a different person and they come as a different character immediately. Of course, it brings another challenge when you want 12 dancers to be exactly the same and they've got no peripheral vision because you've locked them down. And they're like, Kenny, you're giving us such hard steps and now we can't see. First it was apples in our mouths and now you've put masks on our faces. So they deal with a plethora of things and it's incredible. But I think that that's the way to move forward and the work demands it. So we will try our hardest to live up to it. Yes, I was definitely running out there. Thank you. Okay, thanks, Chil. guys. I'm not going to kill you tonight. Good. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow, yeah? Okay. The next section.
So I really have to apologize. I did rehearse them earlier in this dance because I love it so much. And no wonder they were looking at me when I said this.
Yeah.
Like their eyes got a bit bigger, and they was like, "Oh, not again." So now we're going. I don't know what I'm doing here. Actually, I'll just facilitate. But now we're going to have another question and answer with Ian and Kenny. You two have your things done.
Yeah. We
Yep,
have
I think we're mic'd.
We have our first question.
Wow.
Kenny,
Yes.
can you say a little bit about the way the score and the choreography were created? We all hear about Petipa giving instructions to his composers. You know, we must have this particular phrase here. Now, how did you work with yours? Was it the same, or?
It's a great question. Some things you're trying to pace a ballet. Effectively, you're starting to pace a ballet a year out from the stage. Could be even longer. So, in some of it, it's you talk about the scenario, what you want from the story, and then you have that conversation with your composer. And at first, you want to engage his imagination. You don't want to put too much filter on it. But also, then it comes back and it goes through a process where you strip it back between the two of you. You think this can work. It's also, in some ways, you need a repetition in it because you might have to cut the music. And that's a big job once it goes to orchestration, because remember, you're trying to get your pacing right now. We're going to get to the shoot and find, actually, I need another minute here, or I need something chopped there. And that can be really difficult. Like, it's like having your words cut as a writer. It can be a really difficult thing. And I think it's just being honest in the beginning and that this is the way it's going to happen. Also, what's interesting about Kerry is that he writes for film. So usually he sees the product and then writes for it. So to work the other way was really bizarre, but also, in his words, very freeing. So we just worked really closely with every scene and every detail and what we needed to achieve within that scene, as well as try to evoke Venice, try to evoke Paris, and be really, really clear with themes for characters. And it just went back and forth like that. There was times that I would say, I feel like I need something different. And there was times like the Masquerade, this music you just heard, where Kerry says, trust me, in the flow of the evening and the narrative arc, this is exactly what you need. And I'm like, oh, I'm not sure. But you have that trust, and that's what collaboration is. So that's how it worked.
Next. Oh. Somebody, I know we're forcing you to study tonight.
You were mentioning that there are lots of different things that are involved in the preparation of the ballet. What of these has given you the most sleepless nights?
I think it's the set. I think it's the set because it's like the wigs in some terms is you don't get to see it until the last minute. You have prop version. Most of it actually we have around and we get to practice it. And I always like the set to be really fluid. I want whatever can go onto the stage movable. When that means that they're 7 meters tall and as wide as those trucks you see back there, that becomes a little difficult. So my sleepless night lies over how easily they're going to move. I would say, yeah. And then it's different things. Sometimes you get to a problem that you hit a roadblock and you don't know how to solve it. And in fact, you try to use all the skills you've garnered so far, and it's just not happening. And that's the moment that the panic sets in. You're in the front of the room, and you feel everything just closing down. 45 sets of eyes, just like, he's got nothing. And it's in that moment, you're like, ah! But like I said to David, just one foot in front of the other.
I think we had one down here.
Yeah. Oh, it's like a chat show.
Hi there. I was just wondering, at what stage does the composer actually get to see the dance that goes with his music?
I send him bits, and he also sends back like, oh, I hear this there. But we were so clearly already talking about the story, and when I was describing to him to get the flavor of the music and the atmosphere, I was already describing what I would want in the dance and what I saw happening as it was going. He gets little excerpts, but he says, please don't send me any more. I don't want it to be ruined. I want to see it in its whole entirety. And he comes sort of 2 weeks before the premiere, so soon, yeah.
Although you should know, I mean, you know, Kerry is watching now, so we should say hi.
Shout out,
to
Kerry!
Kerry in Los Angeles, live streaming. So he's seen this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he'll be awake. You're right. Yeah.
Carrie, I have to tell you, I love the moment when the note for the masquerade comes in and the musicians. I wait for it every time. Now all the dancers look at me at that moment.
Kenny,
yes.
How different is the dance as you imagine in the beginning and how you see it now? Is it too much different, or
That's such a brilliant question. And something I learned really early on is there has to be room to breathe and for adaptability in the room, because what it's doing up here never truly transfers out there. And if you get stuck with a picture here and thinking, oh, it's not looking like that picture, you can be with that problem for so long. I think that part of the great thing about choreographing and live art is that you live in the moment. And it's always changing as long as you're alive. I look at it today one way. In a few years, I'm going to look at it completely different because I'm in a completely different process in myself. So it's also good to go back. You're always self-editing, but you also have to be careful not to edit too quickly and to allow it time to sit, because what you think might not have worked then ends up working. So it's like a variation. Sometimes this is exactly as you imagine, and other times it goes so far from it. But I think sometimes the most exciting thing for us is that that's the beautiful thing. Hey, with narrative ballet, there is a structure. You can't go too far outside. You know, you're trying to tell a story at the end of the day. But that's not to say there won't be some beautiful surprises along the way, and you can say, hey, Ian, let's rewrite that bit.
Well, it's the first time I've been in a ballet rehearsal room, but also seeing something created in front of you. I've been involved in new plays that I haven't written, and I've been involved in my own new work. And what's really impressive is to see not the usual lockdown you have with a script and a writer, but actually a pooling of the extraordinary creative energy that this room has and this man allows. So Gavin, who you met earlier, is in the process of creating Claremont Casanova's manservant, who wasn't a character in the original scenario, and is a minor part of the biography and the memoir, but in Gavin's hands will not be a minor character in this ballet. So there is much brought along the way.
Yeah.
We have a question from Twitter for Ian, and that is, what was it that first got you interested in Casanova?
What was it first got me interested in Casanova? I toil in the 18th century. That is my nerdy life a lot of the time in the British Library, and of course you can't escape the works of Giacomo Casanova, and he's a really important source for sort of social history. So it's that. But actually, really, what it was was his food writing. Bizarrely, not many people, know this, but actually Casanova writes more about food than he does about that for which he is more famous, and therefore he's really interesting on what people are eating where. And I have a particular interest in food history, so it was that. So I initially brought to my publishers the idea that I would do, Casanova, food writer. And strangely, they weren't utterly sold on that idea. And it became more or less Casanova and the invention of sex, or of that idea, as I was saying earlier, of a lot of our modern understanding in the West of sex being born of that period, and his writings being quite important in that. But the book is structured actually as a 5-act opera, pretentiously, with sort of intermezzi, bits of social history, food and Casanova, and sex and Casanova, and travel and Casanova, that sort of thing. It was always about theatre. It was always actually about performance as well. I'm an actor as well as a playwright and historian, and of course that's also, I suppose, an understanding that I bring to him, is that actually that is one key to understanding him, is him as a child of the theatre. Thank you, Twitter.
We've actually had a bit of a duel-off between David and Ian for the role of Bragadin, and they're both excellent. I'm really struggling to pick at the moment.
There we go. Yeah. Yes.
It's like, no way. Sorry, there was a question up there, yeah.
Yes, I'm in awe of these people and indeed their bodies. No, I mean I'm in awe of their dedication to what they do. I wish. I think I think I'm probably a bit past it for that. But there we go. Never too old, maybe. No, there was when I first came actually here, and Northern Ballet had been so welcoming. It's such a glorious institution to be part of for a little while. But Hannah Bateman was running when I was first here a sort of a retreat for anybody who wanted to learn ballet. So I'm signing up because that is something, yes, absolutely, I'd love to do. Everything else I've written or adapted, film and theatre and whatever, I have snuck in some Hitchcock sort of way. So this is the first time I am exclusively, no matter what he tells you, in the audience.
I don't know. Yeah, fab.
Any more? One more?
I have another Twitter question.
Well, great, because our audience doesn't have any more by the looks of it.
The question is, did you have particular dancers in mind for the roles when planning the show?
Oh, that's a tough one.
That is a tough one, because getting casting out of him was a challenge.
It's like, it's so important, isn't it, how you see the show? Like, somebody is going to deliver that for you. So, of course, you have, yes, I did, is the short answer. And I was always clear that I was going to, that I wanted to create this role for Giuliano. He has so many qualities that I think are Casanova. And he has some of the experience to also, But it's more than that. It's his physical intellect as a dancer that really interests me, and his adaptability through many different styles and a lot of different vocabulary. Like Casanova played many roles, You see the church material as opposed to the musician material is a vast difference. And the dancers of Northern Ballet have to do it all. They are exceptionally great classical ballet dancers that are then doing really, really great contemporary movement there, and they're executing it at such a high level. So Giuliano is really a dancer that is so very versatile, much like Casanova. And so for me, I really saw it in that. But then you have a host of other great dancers like Javier and Joe, and you start to see Casanova in them in different ways. So it becomes really difficult. I hold on to the casting for so long because you're and ahhing like, oh my God, this dancer has this, they have that part of him. That is absolutely right. So in the end, luckily we have 3 casts, and you should try to see them all because they all bring something different. They really do, right?
I find that particularly interesting because these particular 3 dancers couldn't really be more different than one another. And I think that reflects very much back on Casanova, because I think everybody has their own particular idea of what Casanova is or could be. And I find it interesting watching the rehearsals and just seeing the different play. And then what's more interesting is actually in the first cast, for instance, Javier is Bragadin. So he's seducing the character he's going to be playing in another night. And Kenny, of course, did some very clever choreography with the 2 of them, which has to do with about the, what do you call this thing? I can never remember the
Kabbalah.
Cabal.
Yep.
I always wanted to call it kebab for some reason. And I was just looking, when they made it, I was just looking at Javier's face, and I pointed at him and I laughed and I said, and you have to reverse all of that in the other character. And he just looked at me. So it's really, what I love about the company in that way, and something that I've always tried to do, is make casts different. Even though the choreography is the same and the language and what they have to say for the choreographer is true, they do it with their own color, their own dynamic. And I learned that very young, because sometimes I used to watch companies and it didn't matter, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth cast all looked the same. And you couldn't actually get anything different from going to see a different show, because they were very, very similar. And all good, but just the same. And I find when you have different aesthetics and different skills and different things that are weak and strong, it always produces very different performances. And you have different ages. So you put older dancers, medium, and younger all in the same part, and it's going to manifest itself in a very different way. So
Yeah. And so that was for all the characters. Each one was really thought about, and they presented themselves really clearly to me. But like David says, there's other qualities that bring other things, and it makes that exciting as well. So I feel like there is really 3 great casts to see.
So I guess is there one more, one last question sneaking in?
Here at the front, there was.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I don't know. Ooh, good question, because now he's going to have to think of casting sooner rather than later.
I like to think of it as a lucky dip.
A lucky dip. Yes, you won't get the letter that says my 3 lucky dips were the same dip. Yes. It does get posted once it's up. It does get posted on the internet. So.
It's just injury can sometimes be difficult. You know, it's a small. It's not. It's a reasonable sized company, but for the amount of shows it does, there is obviously a lot of injuries picked up and a lot of it changes. So they do try their best to get it out there as early as possible. And I promise you, it's pretty much as they know, it comes straight out.
So I guess that draws this evening to a close. I don't hope that you enjoyed it, because I think actually there shouldn't be a question there with what you got to see tonight. I want to thank Ian, because he's so eloquent. I'm glad I spoke before him.
I know, I felt.
And Kenny and the dancers. You really only saw a slither of this ballet. I mean, it's just. When I first described it, I kept saying it's going to be a feast for the eyes, and it truly is a feast, and not like a little, 2-course special with a prosecco. This is kind of like a kaiseki, if you know what that is in Japan, which is course after course after course of exceptional delicacies. And what's brilliant to watch is that each scene has its own look, its own style, and yet always linking through is his language. So I'm jealous. I'd like to say one thing, 2 things actually. Please join us outside for a drink, and now to do a little bit of the business side. We do have a costume appeal going, which to date has, I believe, raised £4,000. As I mentioned, this budget sort of became a bit of a feast as well. And the wigs are costing us pretty much as much as the costumes, to tell you the honest truth. And we need any help is welcome, and you all always help us. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Yeah.